thought about how success can be a pain? Of course, most of us are hoping that the thing we're working on gets more customers, makes a higher impact, a reason to hire more people, get more jobs, add more better features, solve more and better problems, and so on. But as developers, designers, content people, and managers, it also involves more complexity and coordination. Not only do you need your website to scale with an increasing audience from potentially all over the world, but you also need to and make sure that your project can scale. You have that growing team and you want to add more features, so you want to make sure. Aloha everyone, my name is Kapehe. I'm a Senior Developer Relations Specialist at Sanity.io. We're a platform for structured content who are working to make it easy to build products with content that scale. And today we're going to talk about how you can build for success without a lot of upfront costs so you can spend your time on the stuff that matters and is specific to your project. Let's say you're tasked with a knowledge base to help your customers or even internal teams to figure out what they need to do without having to contact support. That's huge. Maybe you're working in a startup that is starting to get a lot of customers, or you're a developer in a large organization who wants to document a design system together with the designers and editors. So fortunately, with tools like Next.js and Vercel, your website is ready for scaling from the get-go without losing performance, thanks to CDNs and the Edge network. And Next.js lets you build with components and templates in a structured way and abstract when you need to. So, for example, with Next.js's new layout routes, you can go from simple page-based routing to more advanced routing that lets you go more granular and do server-side data fetching in components, ideal for authenticated routes, building out customer-facing dashboards, and so on. So, being able to start simple and add more complexity as you need is a principle called progressive enhancement. Sometimes you will also hear progressive enhancement used specifically about how you load JavaScript in the browser, but we're going to use it more broadly in this talk today. So, great developer experience is often built on the principle of progressive enhancement. But progressive enhancement isn't just important for developers, it's important for your project and your team as a whole too. So for web design, it often means that you start with the content first, and then you evolve your visual design around it. If you think about it, it's especially true for knowledge base if the content that your audience will interact the most with is the focus. So as a designer, it's super useful to know what the design is supposed to accommodate up front, instead of figuring out later that your assumptions didn't hold up when the real content comes into your design. So, and likewise, as a developer, it's super useful to have real content when you're building your templates and your components. So, this takes us to how we get this content to happen. So, as developers, our go-to for adding some content to our website is often by hard coding it right into the HTML or adding it via markdown files. This can make a lot of sense if it's just you, if you're making this for yourself. And the fact that your content is right next to your code is super great because you don't have to context switch and you can use tooling in your code editor for your content too. Awesome. However, if you plan to have someone else who isn't a developer working on that content, then this approach stops being simple and starts to be hard. You probably need to teach your team about Markdown and Git now. And suddenly you need to push content updates into your Git history alongside the new website features you are building. And so you probably need something like a CMS. So most CMSs either require you to install a whole separate app though, with its own database and deployment config to have a local and production environment. Or else you have to log into a bespoke dashboard where you have to context switch between your code and their UI for form building, and you can't be confident that you can customize it to what you need down the road when those needs arise. And they will. And you also want to make sure you're structuring the content in a way that makes it easy to design for and code with. And you don't want anyone to suddenly change the name of a field on accident and break the whole app. Ugh. So at Sanity, we're working with the next iteration of the Sanity Studio. We want to make it really simple to add content editing experiences to your apps. So without having to context switch, building up what is going to be the app's data structure, while giving your team an intuitive and non-bloated, user-friendly editing environment that's still fully customizable. So the next version of Sanity Studio is in many ways a framework for creating, editing experiences. And you can add it to Next.js with a single dependency, Next-Sanity. It's just a React dependency that you can mount anywhere in your Next.js app. That is, you can actually mount the studio in any app and build it with any modern bundler. So I'm going to show you a demo, and I'm going to start simple so that you can scale from this. We're going to be starting from the beginning, like really, really beginning, like create next app type beginning. And if you can believe it, in less than 10 minutes, we'll have a full Sanity Studio embedded in our Next.js app. I'll quickly show you how to display your content on the front end and have under one URL your Next.js app and your content editing platform, the Sanity Studio. So let's get right to it. Okay, so like I said, we're starting at the beginning. We're creating a Next app using npx create next app. We're going to name it Next.js conf sanity. We're going to hit enter, let that do its thing, and then we're going to open it up in VS Code. All right, looks like it's done. Let's open that up. Now, the first thing we want to do is install the dependencies that we need. So at the time of this recording, you will need Next-Sanity and Sanity at dev-preview. In the near future, you'll just need Next-Sanity, but if you try it today, do both of those. Okay, so we're going to let that also do its thing. So what we're doing is we are putting a Sanity Studio in a Next.js app. So they'll both live, the Sanity Studio and the Next app will live under the same URL. We are going to be creating an admin path. So you remember in WordPress, the /wp-admin, we're creating a folder called /admin. So that's kind of what you can compare it to. We're going to create this route for our editor so that they can access the studio quickly, easily, and they don't have to go find a different URL. All right, so that looks like it's done. Okay, so here's our project. First things first, let's create a config file. So we're going to create a new folder and new file. Within that, we're going to do export config, and within this, we're just going to list a couple things that we need. So project ID and dataset is how our studio and our Next app connect. This is where all of the content is stored because it's stored in the cloud. So Sanity is a real-time platform. The content is never stored locally. So we can use different datasets. We're going to use production in this. If you want to have other ones, you can. We're going to have our API version. I'm going to name the studio Next.js Conf. You can name that anything you want. Our base path is admin. Now we can add a bunch of plugins. For this, we are going to add desktop or desk tool, and you could just continue chaining them on like that. But we're going to do desk tool, and that will be for our studio. Now let's import this desk tool. And cool. Now we're going to leave the project ID blank, well, for now, but let's go grab that project ID and get our app up and running. So I already have in my manage dashboard, this is under my Sanity account, a project. So you can do members, you can do data sets, you can give access to people. Be careful giving access and allowing credentials to certain people. You definitely want to make sure that the people you want getting into your studio to be the ones that can edit. Core's origin, definitely put in the URL for whatever your website lives at and allow credentials. I've put in localhost 3000. We're just going to stay at that today. But once you deploy, definitely get that in there. Now, you can get your own project started at sanity.io and get started. I already did that, so I'm just going to copy this project ID, take it back to my project, and put it in. Perfect. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is the admin route. So this is a wildcard route. So since the studio is a single page application, we need all of its routes to go to /admin. So that's why we're going to do this index.js. So this wildcard route is what it's going to do is redirect all of our URLs under admin to that file, which is the studio component. So it's very important that we do this. There's going to be a couple things in here, but this is really where our studio lives. So we're going to create a config. We're also going to export the page component. So we'll set that up, export default function. We'll call it studio page. And then in here, we're going to have our Next Studio. Now we're going to leave this part blank because we are going to create our config, but let's import a couple things. So let's import the Next Studio, what we're using down below, and we'll bring that from Next Sanity, which we've already installed. Next, we will import create config, and we'll bring that from Sanity. And then lastly, let's import the config from that file that we just made, the sanity.config.js. So let's put our path in. Perfect. So we are going to create the config now. So Studio config will be our config, and then we need to use it down below in that component. Studio config. Perfect. Okay, so right now we have the two files that we need, and this is it. This is all we need to have our Sanity Studio in our Next.js app. And just like that, it's done. But we're gonna do more than this. So there are a couple things that we need to do, but first let's look at what it looks like. So npm run dev to get it running. Let's go to localhost 3000. I'll scroll up a little bit to find that. Yep, localhost 3000. And then this is the standard Next.js landing page. Let's go to /admin, and we should see our Sanity Studio. Perfect. So like we have the name, the Next.js conf that we did earlier, but there's no document types because we haven't defined a schema yet. Now, it's important that we understand these types that we're about to work with. So we have document types and field types. So we have no document types. And then within document types, we have our field types. Field types are the user-friendly UI for content editing. So in here, in the config, we are going to add in our schemas. Now you could make a separate file, but to just drive the point home that this is only two files that you need, I'm going to put it right in here. So it's going to be kind of a long list. I'm going to have 4 field types and 1 document type, but so you could list them here. You import them from whatever file you have, do article, author, post, whatever it is. So I pasted that in. So define type and define field are optional helper functions that can give you auto completion and validation when you're using TypeScript. So here's a couple things that I want to point out. So we have name, title, and type. Name is going to be the internal name of the field. Type is going to be the schema type, and then title is going to be the front-facing, the studio-facing naming of this. So every single field, every single type needs to have a name, title, and type. So it looks like there's an error. Oh, we need to import the define field and the define type. So let's import that real quick. But yeah, like I said, name is going to be the property of the JSON document that the studio writes to. Title is what ends up in the studio, and we'll see that in a second. And type is the field type that decides which UI the editors see. And now we have our knowledge base articles. And this is our document type. So I'm going to click there. It's going to have nothing, but we can create content. So if we click on the little pencil thing, this is what we just created with that schema. So we have the internal title. So there are little descriptions so editors can quickly know what they're looking at, so for internal use to make it easy to find and identify. There's the article title, there's the public-facing title, and then there's article slug that you can quickly generate. And this is what our studio looks like. And I want to kind of talk about this for a second. So we have our 2 files that we just did, and from the beginning, from Create Next App, it took us less than 9 minutes to get a full Sanity Studio in a Next app and for the studio to be up and running, ready for someone to create content. So if we created content, internal title, let's say the category is Hawaii, but the article title that we want is best places to get shave ice. Now, if I wanted to, I could commit all this to Git, deploy it, and very quickly my editors have a URL that they can start editing content. So you can generate that article slug and publish. So you can hit publish and you can make it available to the public API, or it automatically gets synced to the cloud, which is the content lake in real time. So I'm just going to publish it here. Now, this also means that the changes in the editing environment are also in Git, so you have more control over what you're doing, which is especially important if you plan to change your schemas and have to do migrations. So you don't want anyone accidentally changing schema types that these apps rely on. So we bring our editors here, they edit the content, but all the schema types, all that is in Git, and so none of that can be played around with. But I really want to drive the point home that it's 2 files. Very quickly, in less than 9 minutes, we got this all up and running, ready to collaborate with our team. Now I created two articles, 2 knowledge-based articles, but now I'm going to throw in some extra coding and extra files and styling, and I'm going to show you what it looks like. So I just did Next stuff. So I created buttons for the home, which will take us back to localhost 3000, the super secret Sanity Studio. So let me show you quickly what I've done. Now, the index.js file under pages, I have those two buttons. Let's just collapse that for a second. But we do have the get static props, and I'm using Grok here. So Grok is the query language that we use at Sanity. You can also use GraphQL. So this Grok query is going to get all of our articles. So it's getting our articles and the defined slug and pulling out the ID, title, and the slug. And those are the things that we need. So you can use Grok or you can use GraphQL. Either one works with Sanity. I highly recommend Grok. It's pretty great. And then we are going to return props, and that's our articles, which we have up here. And then just to show you again, in here, this is the 2 buttons, and then linking or mapping over all of the article titles. So that's why we had the 2 titles listed in the middle. And that is the index page. And then we have the get client, so we're fetching for our data. We also added sanity.server.js. We're using it only for the code that runs on the servers to decrease the bundle size of the front end. And in here we have that create client from Next Sanity. We've pulled in the config from that config file that we made earlier, and we're using it all here. And here are our 2 articles that we made earlier, and we're just mapping over. So if we added more, that list would just get bigger and bigger. So if I click into one, I'm just displaying the title in the slug, but we do see that the slug is in the URL. So we have URL / and then the slug that we created in the studio earlier. Now let me show you that slug file just real quick. All right, so in here, so the slug, it's in 2 brackets. That means it'll just be replaced with whatever slug we're using. So we're going to tell Next how many pages we have, so that's get static paths, and then we're going to get the data for a single page, get static props. So I'm just doing Next stuff here. So if you're familiar with Next, you're familiar with these 2 functions. With these 2, the get static paths and the get static props, we are able to display all of our content on the slug page. And again, I'm just pulling out the ID, the title, and the slug. You can have more, you can list more, you can take away some. Maybe you don't want the title, but we needed the title in this case. Perfect. So there's that. And then up at the top, we are just displaying the article title. Again, we could have listed more, but for this demo, we're just going to stick it there. So if we go back to our home, we see our 2 listed. If we click on Super Secret Sanity Studio, let's go make a quick edit. So I'm going to click into here. Is there shave ice in the desert? the content editor notices that this isn't correctly capitalized. So it's a title. We need to make sure it's capitalized like this. Hit publish. And if we go to home again, we will see right away that that is now correct and fixed. So very quickly, somebody was able to go in, and only if they have access, they were able to go in and update and edit that content. They could also go in and create content. So I want to stress how little effort and overhead this was. So the code you have to write was directly related to the thing that you were actually making. Almost everything else was taken care of. From here, or from just the 2 files that we made, you could deploy this to Vercel and have your URL myproject.com/admin, and you can have your editors working on content with you. So I do want to mention that it is possible to make an edit link on the website that only appears for people logged into Sanity, and that can take them right to the place in the studio. And then that you can have them side-by-side previews in the studio as well. All right, so now you have your Next.js app, your Sanity Studio embedded, and we took care of this stuff at the beginning and started small. We started simple, but this has allowed us to build for success. We now have a great baseline where we are able to create content, work with teams, and it all lives in one nice URL. So I hope you learned a lot, and thank you for watching. So that's our demo. We got our Sanity Studio embedded into our Next.js app with only 2 files at its bare minimum. So if you want to try this out for yourself, you can head on over to sanity.io/nextjsconf, where you can learn more about Sanity and get a boosted free plan. It's always exciting to see what you all are building, and if you're interested in sharing or to learn more from others, come find me, the rest of the Sanity team, and an awesome Sanity community in our Slack, and you can find that at slack.sanity.io. Come follow us on Twitter at sanity_.io, and you can find me on Twitter at Kapehe_OK. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you around.